Welcome to the respiratory system tutorial. So, to begin, the diaphragm. The process of inhalation, which is caused by the diaphragm, moving from its resting domed shape, as you can see here, so the resting dome shape is like the relaxed, and then to its flattened state, which is when it contracts. So when you are breathing in, it flattens, and when you breathe out, it goes back to the resting dome shape. So the volume of the thoracic cavity increases and the pressure decreases, meaning that volume and pressure have an inverse relationship. So pretty much um, the um, the flow through the thoracic cavity causes like the equal amount of air molecules in and out of the lungs, which is what equilibrium is. And the diaphragm is meant to contract or tighten, which is when it flattens, in order to help you breathe by giving your lungs like more space to expand. And the diaphragm is at its equilibrium when it returns to its resting dome shape. All right. So, when we inhale oxygen, through either our mouth or our nose through our nostrils. It then goes through, so like the nostrils contain hair and mucus which filter the air before it enters the body. And then it would pass through the mouth because like it has like a larger capacity for air. And once it passes through either the mouth or the nostrils, it then reaches it then goes through the pharynx, which is the throat, which connects to the larynx. And the larynx contains the voice box, and after it goes through the larynx, it then passes through into through the epiglottis, which is a flap that prevents food and liquid from entering the airway. And after it passes through the epiglottis, it then reaches the trachea, which is pretty much like windpipe with C rings of cartilage, which lead to the bronchi down here, as you can see. So once it reaches the bronchi contain bronchioles, which you can see here, which are connected to the alveoli. So they branch out into many bronchioles, which are connected to tiny sacs called alveoli. And once it reaches the bronchioles, the air stops traveling, or the alveoli. And then, once the oxygen moves from the alveolus to the capillaries through diffusion, CO2 moves from the capillaries to the alveolus via diffusion due to the concentration gradient, which causes it to move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. And as you can see, the air is going in and out of the alveolus, and CO2 is moving in, and oxygen is moving out into the capillaries. All right. So once oxygen is transported through the body by hemoglobin, which is in red blood cells, these then dissolve into our blood. So our neurons then receive oxygen when the hemoglobin is released. And So, the oxygen then passes through the capillaries, which surround the alveoli, by diffusing between the air in the alveoli and the blood in the capillaries, which are made of semi-permeable membranes, which allow oxygen to pass through them. So once the oxygen arrives at your skeletal muscle, some oxygen is stored by myoglobin and the other is used to break down glucose and create energy through ATP. So once ATP is created, CO2 is produced due to the metabolic reactions that occur, as well as the process of converting energy into ATP, as well as releasing waste products into the cells. So then after CO2 moves moves from the skeletal muscle cells into the capillary, it is then transported by diffusing out of the red blood cells down the concentration gradient and then into your lungs. So, the hemoglobin transports some of the CO2, as you can see here, into the alveolus, while the rest of the CO2 is dissolved in like plasma and blood. The CO2 then wants to move down the concentration gradient from capillaries to alveolus. So as you can see, it's moving down and into the alveolus as well. And so once CO2 is exhaled, like when the diaphragm is relaxed, which allows the lungs to recoil. So elastic recoil is pretty much when the lungs return back to the relaxed state after they have been like stretched by inhalation. So as you can see, breathing in causes your diaphragm to flatten, and breathing out causes it to return to its relaxed state, which is the dome shape, as I had said earlier. So once it's back in its relaxed state, the pressure increases, and the pressure increases because the volume decreases because of that inverse relationship. And finally, so if you are exercising hard, your respiratory rate and volume may increase due to the inspiratory center, where the rhythm of respiration is monitored and controlled. So the inspiratory center is located in the brain, in the medulla oblongata, and it pretty much controls your breathing. And when your respiratory rate and volume increases, it causes your muscle cells to require more energy, so more ATP, which causes us to breathe harder and is pretty much necessary in order to restore balance of homeostasis. And yeah, thank you.